So hi everybody, this is Talking Digital Industries, the podcast for technologies and trends that drive industrial enterprises. And I'm your host, Chris Brow. Now in today's episode, we'll discuss a topic that I actually thought I had left behind when I left school, biology class to be exact. We're talking about ecosystems, but don't worry. We're going to stick with the topic of ecosystems in industry, even though, of course, talking about plants and animals and their physical environment would also be interesting. But once again, it's not about that today. It's not only in nature, but also in business that these communities are increasingly becoming a concept for success. And why this is so and what it all has to do with increasing digitalization and unpredictable challenges like the corona pandemic, I am happy to explain today with three really exciting guests. So I'm going to start it off with the Chief Executive Officer of Atos, a global leader in digital transformation, Elie Girard, joining us from Paris. Elie, how are you doing today?
Very good. Thank you very much. And I'm very happy to be here with you today.
All right. Sounds good. Also joining us here today is the board member of Siemens and CEO of Siemens Digital Industries, Cedrik Neike. Cedrik, how are you doing?
I'm great, Chris.
Great to have you with us. And also joining us is the advisor and co-founder of the so-called Digital Transformation Lab, a network of professionals and researchers interested in developing and sharing best practices in this field, Antonio Santos. Antonio, how are you doing today?
I'm very good. The weather is fine, so I'm really happy.
That is important. And tell us, gentlemen, a bit about your background when it comes to school, especially when I think about biology back in the day. I wasn't the best biology student. How about you guys? Elie, maybe you first?
Well, yeah, I'm not sure I was a great biology student, but I think when I think about it, probably I wasn't expressing this in the same words at that time. But I think I was quite fascinated by all the DNA sequencing that was probably difficulties to understand. But when I think about this now and all the implications on new ways of storage in the IT and digital world, I regret somehow not to have spent more time at that time on this. The other, which is a topic of today, is ecosystems. And again, I think, at that time, I'm not that old, but I think back then we didn't even talk about ecosystem really as a word. Right. And even for biology, I'm not even talking about the matter of today in our field, but even in biology. And I think I was quite fascinated, at least by the fact that you would take one piece out of an ecosystem and the full ecosystem would collapse.
How about you, Antonio? Tell us a bit about your background.
I grew up in a farm in Portugal, and that's where I used to spend all my holidays in school. And my grandfather was a beekeeper. So I learned so much from him while collecting honey myself as a kid. My grandfather continued doing that until late in life. And then we donated the bees to another person who took care of them. That experience helped me in the school days. Especially with all other kids, they have more kind of an urban and city experience.
Right. So
I was really helping me to connect with nature.
I understand. And great job, a beekeeper. I mean, we all know about the importance of bees for the ecosystem today. You know what I mean? It's like maybe 20 years ago, it wasn't on the screen like it is now, but we all know how they're suffering and what the impact is for the ecosystem. I want to pass this question on to Cedrik also. What about you back in the day?
If I hear beekeepers and if I hear ecosystems, I actually think of not of school like Elie, but I think of honeymoon. I went with my wife to a honeymoon into the Maldives, and I've seen a beautiful ecosystem, actually a coral reef ecosystem for the first time in my life. But also, and this goes back to what Elie says, it just realizes how beautiful an ecosystem can be, but also how fragile it is. So it's actually different if you learn about DNA and ecosystems in books and if you actually see the power, but also the fragility of ecosystems. So that's what sort of was a big element of my realization of what an ecosystem is.
Interesting. And now, once again, I'd like to thank you all for your private glimpses into your school past or also private past. But when we talk about today's podcast, once again, we're focusing on ecosystems in industry. And you guys got to help me out here, because on the one side, I get the nature stuff, I get the private stuff, but what exactly are we talking about in this context for the industry, and why has this become such an important topic right now? Antonio, you want to start?
Well, the the essential characteristics of ecosystems is that they are multi-entity. They are made up of groups of companies not belonging to a single organization. They involve networks of shifting, semi-permanent relationships linked to flows of data, services, people, and money. The relationships combine aspects of competition and collaboration, and often involving complementary between different products, capabilities. For instance, something that is really part of our lives, smartphones and apps. In general, companies can either make flexible decisions, as in launching a pilot project, or they can commit themselves to a particular strategic path, which is often necessary to reach efficient scale and secure competitive advantage. It's particularly interesting that the shift to ecosystem thinking challenges the very idea of industry that we inherit from the Industrial Revolution.
But in fact, the concept of ecosystems in business is not really new, is it? Now, I'm thinking of fairs in medieval cities at which merchants came together and exchanged goods. I just watched Vikings, by the way. If anybody's ever seen Vikings, you'll see how they actually came to... That just reminded me of it. You know what I mean? Even back then, that was like 800 something or 900 something. And they came together already to form ecosystems and exchange goods. And a bit closer to our time, talking about 1993, it was introduced in an economic context by James Moore in his famous article, Predators and Prey, A New Ecology of Competition. You should check that out. So maybe I could ask Cedrik, what's the exciting thing now?
Well, the exciting thing now is that ecosystems have been accelerated. I mean, the ecosystems, we used to talk about partnerships, but now we talk about ecosystems because of digitalization. Mm-hmm. So when the hardware world, the real world, and the software world, the digital world come together, completely new abilities are being enabled. And like Antonio talked about the smartphone and the apps, that concept is being extended to a much, much bigger, broader place. You talk about predators and prey. The important part of an ecosystem is that parties which put something into the ecosystem get more out for the rest of the ecosystem. So you can't only take, you have to actually give. And I have Elie here on the call. I mean, if I look at Atos and Siemens, I mean, we've been collaborating for more than 10 years. And the idea is really that we have benefited both from being and working together, but also the ecosystems, the players which are benefiting from how we collaborate is really sort of what has made this bigger and more important. So I think that, and I talked about the coral reef early on, we are building, thanks to digitalization, much, much more connected entities, much, much more connected environments. And this is important in the geopolitical times we're living in.
Right.
So our Atos relationship or the relationship with other players is important. We now need to make sure that this knowledge base continues to live on and expands with everyone which is adding to it.
And like you just said, very nice sentence I found when you talked about how ecosystems can only be successful when it's a give and take. You know what I mean? You put it in so that everybody in the system has more of it. And of course, there's a good reason you're sitting here today. Elie, how do you find the right partner for your ecosystem? And where do Atos and Siemens pull the strings together here?
Well, that's the question. And well, first of all, I can fully agree with what Cedrik has just said. I think digitalization has been the driver for the acceleration, not of partnerships, which is now an old word, but for ecosystems. I would even say that if we want to take something slightly positive from the crisis for the last year, the acceleration of the digitalization due to the crisis has in turn increased the ability to create those ecosystems. We've been seeing, and I'm sure same at Siemens, we've been seeing those relationships, ecosystem relationships increasing thanks to the virtual communications and overall digitalization. But I'd like, and of course, on the back of what for me is the best example of what a partnership and then an ecosystem can be is the Siemens-Atos 10-year relationship. I want to underline that the key success factor of this is trust. Building on this relationship, this trust relationship, we gathered very significant ecosystem of partners in a charter of trust built by Siemens and Atos, where we have put forward 10 very simple principles, but very strong principles we adhere to and that we advocate to enable a real trusted, inclusive, and sustainable digital ecosystem and economy. One last point, if I may, which is, the best partnerships and ecosystems are the winning ones. We need to win together. That's just one example, but I think it's quite emblematic. It's a very important win. We win together a very large contract with the Grand Paris Express. Sorry, I'm not underlining this one because it's in Paris, but we're supporting the building of the 3 new metro lines around Paris. Siemens and Atos with third partner, so showing that it's more than bilateral partnerships and a real ecosystem. And I mean, we're so proud of it. We talked about that with Cedrik, many times all along this contract. We're so proud of this because I have very strong feeling that we were not expected there. The competition was not expecting us to win there. So it's the greatest example of a commercial win where Atos, by ourselves or with someone else, probably we would never had won. I would suspect maybe the same on Siemens side, not me to tell. But building on this trust, we managed to beat competition, building on this 10-year relationship. I strongly think that comes from this very strong, trustful relationship.
Obviously, very successful, like you just said. And I also find it interesting what you said at the beginning when you talked about how the pandemic actually kind of accelerated this process also. And maybe also through that, new ecosystems evolve. Like, not to say, hey, the pandemic's a great thing, but I've heard this in so many levels and so many industries, how this has actually been an accelerator for so many things. But let's dig a little deeper. Maybe someone can explain to me using a concrete example of what happens when Siemens and Atos work together as an ecosystem. And Elie, you just kind of outlined it a bit, but how can I imagine this? I mean, how many partners are involved to create a successful ecosystem here? Are we talking about 2, 3, or even more? Cedrik, anything?
So the more the better. I mean, the reality of an ecosystem, for an ecosystem to work, it needs to be adaptable. And this was put to the test. So, I mean, Atos and Siemens have been working together for years, preparing our sales, our vertical, our IoT platforms, and we were talking. Now, but imagine it's a year ago that the pandemic COVID-19 really hit Europe. And within 1 year, we needed to be capable to, with the pharma industry, to find a vaccine and to build it into something scalable with billions of vaccines capability.
Right.
And that's just an amazing feat. So if you have an ecosystem, which we started, and it needs to be more than 2, it's been at the beginning Atos and us, but we've also included pharma to be able to actually take those technologies and adapt in a way we've never done before. So the concrete technology example, and which is highly relevant in this case, is this: we developed a digital twin for pharma using IoT, AI, advanced analytics, the things which we've been working for quite a while. And we said, look, I mean, we need to build quality control in vaccine development. So we need to accelerate this. So we linked this real-time control to the vaccine development and measured in real time what was happening in the bioproduction process. So by changing the parameters and by writing the ML models to simulate the model in digital twins, we provided an acceleration of the production process which never has done before. So in effect, the ecosystem, so the partnership we started with Atos and Siemens extended to the customers and the key players to be able to react super fast to the production of vaccines. So this really made a difference for the production of a vaccine in a much quicker and efficient way. Never ever has the world come up with a problem, solved it, and produced billions of vaccine within a 1 year time span.
Right.
It hasn't happened before. And that can only be achieved by having multiple partners playing together, creating an ecosystem.
Wow. Measuring real time what was happening in the bioproduction process. You got to imagine. I mean, that's just that sentence alone is like, wow, that's possible. Yes, it is. Elie, could you tell us about other similar approaches in other domains?
Oh yeah, I mean there are plenty of them, and I think the pharma example from Cedrik is an absolute fascinating one, especially in this period, obviously. But if I can also mention this experience we had with Siemens on supporting maritime transport company. It's quite fascinating as well because together we built a solution which is based on edge computing. Edge computing, I guess we all know, is going to be a huge word in the years to come. It's already a big thing for both of us, for both Siemens and Atos. And thanks to edge servers that we put on the ships, we managed processing the data locally to optimize the trajectories of the ships. You know that container ships are huge ones, and we managed to reduce significantly the fuel consumption. So it's a fantastic example of joining forces to optimize operational process, simple business process, to reduce the cost and to reduce the carbon emissions. So that's another, I think, quite great example. I could also mention examples in the area of electric vehicle charging systems that we deployed one together in Milan, the city of Milan, where Siemens has been handling the energy supply and Atos has been handling the billing solution. And we could continue like this with many examples in virtually all industries.
Mm-hmm. So I like what you said before about edge computing also, just because we already had a podcast dedicated to edge computing, by the way. I think it was in the first season. If anybody's interested, just check that out again. And security is a good key, which you mentioned earlier also already when you talked about the Charter of Trust. I'd like to bring it back to that one more time, because no partnership is possible without a certain risk. And I don't know who of you is married. I am married. As in any good marriage, things can go wrong, right? And sharing knowledge and technology could be a reason for many companies to be reluctant to join such an ecosystem. What do you say to that, Antonio? Is that an actual scenario? And second question, how would you see the complementary parts of Atos and Siemens with your outside in view? Let's stick to the first question though first.
Okay, so let me use some examples to advocate on ecosystems. Cybersecurity requires collaboration and sharing of information. So sometimes organizations can be reluctant, but there are so many dependencies that if you care about protecting your customers and protecting yourselves, you really need to see the bigger picture. In this particular case, you need to face your fears and recognize that nobody can work alone. And we have plenty of examples out there that make the case on the importance of ecosystems and partnerships in cybersecurity. Another two examples are one that is very dear to me, that is accessibility. How can we improve society to be more inclusive to people with disabilities, and sustainability, particularly the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, because we are talking about things that are also everyone's responsibility. And when we look back to Atos and Siemens, I would say that both huge corporates can complement each other quite well. Atos with strengths and expertise in IT, digital transformation, security, and decarbonized digital platforms, and Siemens with a strong industry expertise and global digital product and software portfolio.
Okay, and if we take the current situation into consideration, being shaken by the corona pandemic and all its consequences, will this make the industry more open to collaboration, do you guys think, or rather the opposite? This is a question to all of you. I don't know, Antonio, maybe you want to start?
The pandemic is at the origin of a cultural change. Remote work became possible, even if it wasn't exactly a new paradigm. Many organizations were already working remotely, but this was now extended to more individuals in the workforce around the world. I've seen people coming together online in informal groups to solve local, national, and international problems. We had healthcare professionals from the public sector working in private hospitals and vice versa. Recently, I observed that Austria received patients from other countries in a great sign of European solidarity. And I would say that there was some unprecedented global collaboration between scientists has dramatically accelerated the understanding of COVID-19. Many companies understood that you might not control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them.
Mm-hmm. That's actually beautiful, because the reality is the pandemic has brought us closer together, because we used to collaborate within the same office, the same environment, but with the new technology, all of us could always collaborate across the globe in a glimpse of an eye. Time zones, of course, allowing. Now, and we needed to, because if we look at what the pandemic has shown us, if we look at our supply chains, the disruptions were pretty massive in the real world. And we needed to work, globalization had already started, but the pandemic had accelerated. We needed to work in a much, much closer and faster way together than we had to, right? I mean, if I look at our supply chain, the numbers of incidents, which means areas which are disrupting sort of the global flow of trades, has doubled within the pandemic.
Wow.
So it's important that we move, and I think that's Jim, our chairman, which says we're moving from an age of disagreement, right? Sustainability, development goals, so global disconnects, to an age of collaboration. Mm-hmm. So he said this at the WEF, we're forced to, and that's good, to be open and collaborative much more than ever. And digitalization has now been sort of the accelerator to actually do this. So when you have willingness to collaborate, when you have need to collaborate, and when you have technology to be able to collaborate, industry is much more open and connected than it was ever before.
Sounds so. Elie, anything you'd like to say to that?
I can add one example, which is the creation of our Scalar, which is the Atos Accelerator. So it's an open innovation accelerator program that we launched right in the middle of the crisis. And I mean, don't want to exaggerate, but I really think that the success of this accelerator has been, in a way, even larger and wider than it would have been outside of the crisis. The need to build the links, to build the relationship, to build the ecosystems, and these open innovation ecosystems has massively increased again, as we said several times in this session, with the crisis, with the pandemic. And today we've got roughly 15 startups who've joined. We have many candidates. We work with Siemens, of course, on several candidates as well. And it's a fantastic example of tying up the links, building ecosystems right in the middle of this crazy situation.
Okay. Cedrik, maybe you can give us a quick idea of what the industrial ecosystem of Siemens looks like at the moment.
So the key thing before I answer this is we have to look back at Siemens curing its NIHS disease, that not invented here syndrome disease, which we used to have. We basically said, look, I mean, we have to change. We have to be much more open. And Elie gave an example with the Charter of Trust where we said, look, I mean, trust can only be built if multiple players, 30 in this case, can come together. Another example, Antonio talked about application. We have the MindSphere World as an excellent example of building collaboration across an ecosystem. So it's an IoT user organization which has joined forces in 2018. We have it. We have 170 members from Italy, Japan, South Korea, Singapore, Southeast Asia, North America, and we share experiences and accelerated transformation to be able to replicate it across the industry. An example, a subgroup is the automotive initiative of the MindSphere World. Mm-hmm. So here OEMs, suppliers, app developers, and system integrators are working together. So we're really extending it. And Elie talked about it. We're going to startups. We're talking to other customers. We're even going to universities, which we've done for a while, but we do it in a much more sort of collaborative way. We work with the Fraunhofer Research Institute and RWTH Aachen on supply chain resilience, which was one of the issues which we definitely saw during the pandemic. So we really went and cured our NIHS disease to be able to be a much, much more collaborative organization.
Once again, I'll say it, not invented here syndrome. I like that. That's really, that's good. Elie, you've also referred to the big impact of decarbonization. And you, Cedrik, your focus is also on sustainability. Now, shouldn't this also be the topic when we talk about the strength of operating in ecosystems? And if yes, if you agree, what are your ideas? Elie, what do you think?
Yeah, thanks for this question, because this is also key now in building ecosystems. I think we share with Siemens the willingness, not just the willingness, but also the evidence and the evidences of making those big words of sustainability, decarbonization, etc., very concrete. And this is what's at stake today. We're not in the phase anymore of making sure of the awareness and concern. And, I think any large company, multinational companies, do have a very high awareness and concern about the planet, etc. I mean, this is a great achievement, by the way, compared to a few years ago. But the point now is what do we make about it? And we need to be super concrete with proof points. And this is what we're working on at Atos together with Siemens as well. And we share this concern of making sure we're not just talking about targets. Talking about targets, though, just want to remind that at Atos we are carbon neutral since 2018, and we are advancing our net zero objectives, which was at 2035. We are advancing it to 2028, which is 22 years ahead of the 2050 deadline from the Paris Agreement. So we're quite proud about that. But what I want to talk more about is what we want to do for our customers. Because after all, this is the most important. So we built actually a full business line at Atos, which is the decarbonization business line, in which we propose not just assessments of decarbonization to our customers, but we propose in all our contracts what we called DLA, decarbonization level agreements, where we say to our customers, look, you used to outsource your IT in the past. Now you can outsource to us your carbon footprint reduction targets. We commit on a reduction of your carbon emissions on the digital infrastructure we take over from you. And if we don't get there, we will pay penalties in the form of we will pay for the offsetting of the miss of the reduction target to make it serious. But again, more importantly, we're developing hundreds of use cases of offerings like the one I mentioned earlier on container ships to reduce the carbon footprint of business processes. And reducing carbon footprint of business processes is basically robotizing, automating, digitalizing business processes. Right. So it's an infinite topic. And again, I'm very proud to be able to do this with Siemens, together with an acquisition of EcoAct, which is a company specialized in this that we acquired a few months ago. And here also, we're building an ecosystem with, EcoAct, with Siemens, with other partners. Well, I'll stop here because this is a very, very wide topic. But you're right to say in your question that this is now at the center of any ecosystem.
Can I add to it? I mean, Elie,
yes,
the one thing which is just super important on this topic, it's not an academic topic. You have to be concrete. You have to walk the talk. So I'll take this, what Elie said, and I said, look, we said that we will be carbon neutral by 2030. But we didn't only say that we will do this. We actually do what we said. We're in the intermediate target. We're already at 54% savings we achieved in December 2020.
Wow.
So it is important that we actually are doing it, and we're starting with ourselves. Don't tell others what to do, but we do it ourselves. That's super important. And that's why we're working on joint infrastructure projects. We're looking at the ecosystem also Elie is creating. I mean, Elie, if you look at what Elie did, is he's taking Atos into the security world, but he's also taking it into the sustainability world as an enabler and accelerator using digitalization. And that's what we want to do. And we're applying this medicine to ourselves. I mean, we have our factory in Amberg, which is a complete digital twin, and we're using it to make sure that the people are safe during COVID-19, but we're also using it to be able to reduce our energy footprint and have a better resource management. I always say that our role is to use, there's limited resources, and we need to use the infinite data to use these limited resources in a much, much better way. That's our role with digitalization.
All right. Thank you for that. And Antonio, hearing this, and if you could choose, in what other areas would you like Cedrik and Elie to set their foot together also?
Well, I have a big list. I think both companies have a global footprint, and I would like them to work together to make sure that diversity, inclusion, and sustainability initiatives could reach the 5 continents. I think it's particularly important that we are able to spread and influence these technologies and these social motives to everyone around the world. The world is changing fast, and we need to make sure that we don't leave anyone behind.
So I think that's a clear order which is placed here, Cedrik and Elie. And one last question also. In 2 years, we'll come together again in the same round. What do you say? Do you still get along? And what would you like to have achieved together until then? I mean, the partnering contract, Atos Siemens, lasts at least until 2025, right?
Yeah, well, Cedrik, we can start with a few words, if I may. Well, first of all, we will celebrate, hopefully physically, that should be on the 1st of July, our 10-year anniversary. So let's start by that. It would be a great celebration. And hopefully that would be perfect if it coincides with ability to progressively go back to a normal life and have a proper celebration. So I'll be very happy to come to Munich, Cedrik, to see you.
You're invited, absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you. No, I think we've got so much going on at the moment. We didn't have time to touch upon Europe and European projects. We are both, Siemens and Atos, founding members of Gaia-X, which I strongly believe is the future of responsible cloud development in Europe. We're working together on Edge. I mentioned earlier, I think Edge is going to be not just a big word, but a large part of our future. You know probably these figures. You know, we are still today in the 80% of data which is produced in the data centers and 20% which is produced at the edge of the infrastructure. Those numbers are going to swap by 2025. So 20% of the data will be produced in the data center, 80% at the edge of the infrastructure. So this edge computing, where I think with a good vision, honestly, jointly, Siemens and Atos, we are slightly in advance on this. We need to increase the advance. And I think, as you said in your question, Chris, next time we meet in 2 years, I'd like that we celebrate that we are distant pioneers and distant leaders in this area. And again, I could talk again about decarbonization, we talk inclusion, diversity, etc. But I shall stop here.
All right, we'll make a podcast out of that. Yes, Cedrik?
Yeah, if I look at it and look at the, if I put my American Silicon Valley hat on, I would have said, look, we will eat our own dog food, which basically means whatever we come up with technology-wise in the combination of Atos high-performance computing hardware, our digital twins, we will use it for ourselves and our customers. Now, the good thing about Elie, he's French, so we will say not eat our own dog food, but drink our own champagne. So we want to actually not only celebrate the 10 years, we want to be the accelerator which turns innovation into reality and which takes this reality through the ecosystem. And that's where we're learning from the ecosystem by bringing so many people on board to transform pharma, to transform energy, to accelerate CO2 reduction, that we really will have an impact. And if we achieve that, then we will have drank our own champagne and we can celebrate because we will have, as part of an important ecosystem, impact for Europe, the world, but also for the most pressing sort of questions which we have. If we do this, we will have been successful, Elie.
A toast to that, I would say. That's a great ending sentence right there. And thinking about champagne, I don't know, looking at the time, maybe. But nevertheless, really exciting topic and a great roundup here. Unfortunately, time has run out. So I'd like to thank you all for joining us here today. Cedrik, Antonio, Elie, it's been great having you. I hope you enjoyed it also.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you all.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you also to our many listeners out there. And as usual, at this point, a few hints for further information. For example, on www.siemens.com/digital-enterprise. So stay tuned for our next episode. This is Talking Digital Industries. I'm Chris Brow, and please join us again soon.